We'll go ahead and get started. And apparently Jack is not going to be able to join us tonight or today. Jack is, his grandkids keep bringing him illnesses home from school, so he's not available. So I'll sit in today. We'll go ahead and get started. And first thing to do, of course, is a roll call. We want to start with Tricia.
Tricia Bernhardt, present.
Clark Hamelman here.
Sean Tonner, present.
Evan Ela, present.
Don Langley, present.
Mickey Conway, present.
James Eklund, present.
Harold Smethels, present.
And we have Roger Hudson and Jim Morris are online, so we certainly have a quorum. First order of business, approval of meetings from, our minutes from the last meeting, which was December 15th. So if anybody has any modifications or anything, you could let that be known. Otherwise, we'd look for a motion to approve. Motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay.
That really reflects more to the email from January 6th, where it goes to next steps. In the first quarter of 2026, to begin public outreach. I thought we voted on and agreed at that last meeting that typical in the minutes, that until we had a chance to thoroughly go through the draft plan, that we wouldn't start public outreach. So that's a change from what my notes were from that meeting.
You say that's in the minutes, Jim, or Harold? You're referring to a comment in the minutes.
No, I'm referring to the January 6th, 2025 meeting that went out
Oh,
to us from staff. It says next step in the first.
Hey, Evan, can we get him to use the mic so we can hear him online?
Questioning the minutes as much as I am that the minutes and the meeting are different than what came out in the next steps memo dated January 6, 2025, which I'm quoting: in the first quarter of 2026, Forest Green will begin public outreach to be incorporated in the water plan. At the meeting that we were at, we agreed that we would not go for public outreach until the Water Commission had had a chance to go through all of the aspects of the draft plan and we're comfortable with it before it goes out.
yeah, I would agree with your interpretation, or what you're saying, that we talked that it needs to be delayed until we're comfortable with that. And I thought we were targeting perhaps March, but maybe as late as April. So,
Well, just whenever the commission needs to be comfortable with what goes out before
agree.
it goes out.
Yeah.
And so so the minutes are fine. I just want to make sure with staff that we correct that comment about, that it's steam driven in the first quarter that we're going out to public.
okay, are you with us on that? Okay, all right, so noted.
I think Mickey or Commissioner Conway had moved acceptance of the minutes, and I had seconded that just for procedural.
Thank you. So, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay. There was one referral item on the portal this month for everybody to look at and decide if they wanted to make any comments on that. This is the 5054 Crowfoot Valley Road. So are there any comments people would like to post on that one, or are we good? Yes, Tricia?
I'm sorry, Don, were you talking about the Crowfoot Valley one?
Yes.
Okay, yes, I'd like to make a comment. In the demand analysis, they're saying that they need 15.3 acre feet of water for mostly irrigation. I would strongly suggest that they scale back their irrigation plan. That's a lot of irrigation water. So I'm not sure why that would get approved with that much irrigation water.
And that's like 5 million gallons, right? Yeah, okay.
I thought that was was referring to what is currently approved. You know, it was approved several years ago.
That may be.
But I also reacted the same way. I mean, it's like 15 times as much water is being used for irrigation as is used for everything else at that facility, and that's just kind of crazy. It shows how much we use our water for irrigation. That may be an extreme example, but that's just crazy numbers.
Yeah, okay. Do you have that? All right, so Lauren will pass those comments along to go to the county commissioner, don't they?
It'll go through the planner, yep.
Through the plan. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we get to the fun part of the day. This is the draft water plan workshop. We have our workshop team here at the table with us. At the far end is Claire Van Kampen. She's a Forest Grant employee. We all know Will already, and I think everybody knows Bill Franzak as well. So we have them here. And we'll start through this process. I'm actually going to turn it over to Will and let him start kind of guiding us through this. This is the first kind of interaction with us on the draft. There's going to be at least another one next month. We're thinking, from what I've seen of the schedule and stuff, that we start to get, I'll call it to like a really quality draft where the the language is good and all those kind of things. Maybe that's April, May time frame. So the point being is today we need to stay pretty directional. We need to make sure that they're heading down the path we want them to head down. They're doing the things we really want them to do, and not really get kind of hung up in the language. So if that's fair, if that's a good kickoff, I'll let you go.
Okay. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad to hear that this is the fun part of the meeting, so let's try to keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Make sure it's fun, right? That'll be good. We're also going to have a guy named Jason Broom joining us online, and Jason is also with Forest Grant. So let me give you an overview of what we're trying to accomplish with our workshop today. We have 4 chapters to discuss, and with that, we've got some shown on we've got some ideas in mind about how much time each of these chapters should take for discussion. So we want to try to get through this, getting all your comments certainly, but then also keeping in mind that we are trying to keep it a high level of discussion. So we are, what you have is a working draft. This was really kind of an interim step, and this is a good time for us to check in with you all and make sure that we're heading the right direction so that at the end of this, we meet your expectations. Do we need to realign here and there to make sure we hit the target? So that's really the importance of this, your review of this document for us is to, and there's going to be some more drafts that follow, certainly. So we will introduce each chapter and discuss, also let you know what changes we're already working on for those things. This was, as I said, a working draft where we have some things we're working on for the next draft already. And so we'll intro each of the chapters for you. And then we would like to promote some open discussion about the big picture items. And again, not getting bogged down with word choices or typos or things like that, but what are the major concepts that the Water Commission needs to weigh in on and resolve and make sure that we're going the right way. So we would also ask for very clear direction from the group. And so as we have discussion on things, everybody's got an opinion just like a belly button, right? So we want to everyone to maybe coalesce and can we reach some general consensus on direction so that we have very clear marching instructions for our next draft and that everyone is on the same page. So that's what we would request from you all. If there are some things that are for items that really need more discussion, or you got to think more about them, or you got to check on some more information that you'd like to have before deciding on things or giving direction on some things, we will put those in the parking lot. That's a list of things that the staff has already started preparing for the things that that the commission has brought up before that we need to include in the plan. And so we will defer those things. If something, we just can't get there today, let's put it in the parking lot and pick it up another time.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. Lauren did go back, and the rest of the staff, and kind of look through all the things we've talked about over the last couple years, and has constructed a parking lot document that hopefully captures all that stuff, and then we can add to it too. So thanks for the reminder.
Okay, and then if there are detailed comments that follow this meeting, if you could return those to us by February 2nd, that'd be ideal. So we would request that. Okay, so you guys ready to have some fun? Dig into this? Let's do it. Okay. All right. By the way, we've already received a lot of really good comments from Commissioner Bernhardt, so we appreciate that. And we will start with chapter 1, and we have 4 chapters to talk about today. The others will be bringing some more information to you on for those other chapters for the next workshop. Okay, so let's go to chapter 1, and this really is just kind of setting the stage. Some good comments from Commissioner Bernhardt about let's make sure we're kind of setting the table with regard to water supply issues and the county overall. We will also have an executive summary at the end of this thing that ties different pieces of this together. So some of that information may be in the executive summary. But this one's a pretty straightforward couple of pages. We have a map of Douglas County, and so I'll open it up for any discussion on this one. Yes, sir.
Excuse me. Harold Smethels. I'm a little bit concerned as I look at the purpose. Second paragraph, second line. The county is in a position to promote land use decisions. I think that understates the county's role. Words like regulate, control, approve, appropriate use of water, all of those things I think need to come in. The county has that authority. 18A, for example, they're regulating development based upon estimates of the water table. So I think that needs to be much stronger and this is the kind of thing I think I saw one of the attorneys come in, or you're an attorney, just it needs to more fully reflect the county has ultimate jurisdiction on land use, and that includes water. And also, beyond that, they also have jurisdiction on policy. For example, I'll get ahead of myself a bit. We talk a lot about reuse in your report. Well, the county can also regulate reuse. You know, as I see some of these, I read the comment that meeting ago with the restaurant that was crippling in size. They need a lot more water, but how we get that back? So I think that would be another role that the county has, is to regulate and promote reuse. So I think that needs to be strengthened dramatically. Happy to work with you on it. Lawyers do a better job than I do at that.
This Evan Ela. The only thing that struck me in the first page was in this line, I guess it's the last line of the last sentence in purpose, where you refer to the county's most precious water resource. It really, I think, could be reworded to show that it's really, the water does not belong to the county, belongs to all kinds of different entities in the county. But there's certainly a way to restate that, to say that, you know, you're trying to find a sustainable future for the use of water throughout the county, something like that, rather than showing a possession.
Don Langley. So I thought I was looking for more, I'll say more of a description of what the plan is intended to be, and what the document that follows. Perhaps, you know, why we came together, why we're trying to write this plan, and I didn't see that here. This was just a kind of a little bit of a generic opening. So I thought maybe there's some language around that could be crafted. Is that fair?
So why the plan is drafted?
Yeah, I mean, why we're doing the plan, and you know what you use the water master, that term water master plan. We've never called it a master plan, by the way.
And we need to change that.
But I don't know if even if a touch of history is appropriate here, that, you know, Water Commission came together, Water Commission, you know, has a purpose to draft a water plan to help the county commissioners and all the residents and all the local governments, you know, to map out and plan how we're going to use, how we use our resources in the future and, you know, how we can preserve them, those types of things. So that's all I was thinking. Doesn't have to be long, but just kind of tee it up a little better, maybe.
Clark Hamelman, yeah, building on both what Don and Evan have said, the sentence that says, yeah, the county is not a water provider, kind of begs, well, why the plan then? And that kind of goes to what I think you were saying, Don. But I think it ought to say in there that this plan, one of its findings is that the county doesn't need to be a water provider. It kind of begs that by saying it's not a water provider, but the county is doing a plan on the provision of water in the county, so.
Okay. Yeah, Mickey.
One thing I've had neighbors ask me kind of what we're doing, and it seems to me that one of the purposes of the plan, at least, is to inform residents as to what availability of resources are, and just bringing the concept of the residents into the thinking of the plan might be something that would be appropriate.
Yeah. I agree with that. How do I know if you're allowed to
Okay, it
ask
sounds
for
like
something?
pretty much good consensus so far. So, where you go, you guys?
James Eklund. So yeah, on the purpose section, it struck me as you point out how growth is a driver. It's in the first sentence. But we don't really say, you know, what's the purpose of this effort to the comments that have already been made. Is it to constrain growth? I don't think so. Shape growth, accommodate growth. Or what are we doing? If we're going to point out the growth, which is appropriate and it's true, what is this plan going to do? Say, make information available about to address that.
Harold Smethels again, and I'm sorry, I just thought of this as you mentioned it, James, because you're right. But the county also has, obligation is a wrong word, responsibility is closer, for those on existing wells and planning for contingency and for thoughtful use of water resources affecting existing well users. I think that needs to be part of the deliberation of this plan. You know, I was struck by a comment on the western part where the comment was the shallow aquifers might be going dry, but there's plenty of water down in the Arapahoe well, the Onondaga well over. It doesn't have $1 million to drill that. So I think the county has an obligation to look at some of those policies. I didn't say it very well because I just thought of it with James' comments.
Thank you. Anyone else?
This is Jim Morris. There was mention of a executive summary that will be in this document at some point, so I'm in favor of that, and I'm not sure how far the executive summary will go, if it's 1 page or 2 pages or 3 pages, I guess. I think it's important somewhere in the executive summary or here in this section to talk about where we are as a county in relation to what's going on around us. It talks about growth up in the northern part of the county. There's a little bit of growth down in the southern part of the county. I think it's important to recognize that the largest providers north and south of us both have significant water resources coming in from the western slope. Douglas County currently has no viable, significant surface water source, and we don't have access to western slope water. And I think it's important that somehow get worked into here, that the big players north and south of us have a lot of western slope water. We don't have that. I think we all agree that the groundwater we have is being mined, and that will come out, I think, in the water availability section that we're going to talk about. But somehow we need to, I think, project early on in this document that we have the lack of something that the major growth areas to the north and south of us have.
Yes, sir, and we do have, I know there's some connectors that have a connection with Denver Water, and there's indirect use of West Slope Water through the WISE project for South Metro. So there's a few connection points there, but yeah, that's a good point. Could be more.
Well, Aurora Water is part of that WISE, I believe, and
Yes,
they
sir.
have significant water. I mean, from the Fry Arc project, which dumps down to Pueblo and again Colorado Springs, they get a significant amount of water from that. So I think it's it's something that we need to lay out as part of, I think, why we're here and what we're trying to accomplish is we don't have that source, and we need to talk about how that makes a difference in the county.
Harold Smethels again. I was thinking of Evan's comment. He was right about the precious resource. Let me give a little bit of a wordsmith, take it or leave it. I think we should say that Douglas County views water as one of its key resources and focus of interest, and has taken upon itself to do this study to make sure we're providing a robust water system and supply into the future.
Okay, anybody else on introduction, or should we move to chapter 4? Oh, Mr. Eklund, yes.
It was just on one.
There we go. All right. I know, we don't. So,
I got a button for that, right?
so the map seems like a good place to situate. So that's the county. And you do have down in the very bottom left of this map where that county is in the state, kind of vis-a-vis other counties, I think. But I think just situating it in maybe a bigger blow up of that would be helpful, so that people know that we're not operating in a vacuum, and that there's connectivity to a lot of different systems, to the point that was just made, whether you're talking about WISE, Denver Water, you touched the Colorado, Aurora has part of its service territory in the county. There's just a lot of connectivity to a lot of different parts of the state, and kind of using a visual right out the gate to show that, I think would help inform, to Commissioner Conway's point, the public about, this isn't just one county of 64 counties in a state. This is a county that happens to be situated in the fastest growing part of the state, with connectivity to a bunch of different hydrological resources.
Sean Tonner, kind of piggyback, and I believe there's a map, James, correct me if I'm wrong, in the statewide water plan where it shows some of the systems, the major systems, like Denver, Aurora, Colorado Springs, Northern, and where they get their water, whether it's off the Colorado Platte or the Arkansas. I think that might be interesting for the reader, one, to see where Douglas County is, but then also see water has moved extreme distances when you're talking about, the Twin Lakes project to Colorado Springs or to Aurora, or what Denver Water, their tentacles all over the western slope. So it might be just a good visualization that we're kind of piggybacking on what you're saying, that Douglas County is one of 64, but one of 10 along the Front Range, and one of, we're bracketed by 2 and 3 major water systems that are grabbing from all over. I mean, Aurora's, I think, outside the Rio Grande Basin, the Yampa, and I think San Juan, I think they're in every single basin. So, yeah.
They are. Okay. All right, should we move on?
Sure, sounds good. Okay.
Thank you.
Good thoughts, thank you. So let's now turn to,
That's 2 pages down.
that's right. 2 pages down, many more to go. But so public engagement is going to, that's going to follow, as we talked about, that's down the road. And so after the public engagement, then we'll document that and include that as a chapter in the plan. Then land use considerations, we'll talk about that in a later workshop. So chapter 4 is having to do with water providers. And Claire is going to discuss that with you and intro that. Claire.
Yeah. This is Claire Van Kempen. Good to meet y'all. I've been working on this project since the beginning, just kind of in the background, so it's good to see y'all.
You might have to get closer to the mic, I think.
Can y'all hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to facilitate the discussion on Chapter 4, which is the water providers chapter. In this chapter, we present the information that was collected from the water providers survey, and we summarize that for each of the water providers. So this is kind of an introduction to the 31 water providers, and they are categorized into major, medium, and minor water providers based on their annual demands. And so while we were putting this section together, we did notice some discrepancies, some odd things in the survey data that, maybe didn't add up, that we knew that we were going to need to go back to some of these water providers to figure out the discrepancies. And we have started to do that. We've reached out to a couple of the bigger ones, Parker and Highlands Ranch. And there's, a couple more at least that we will need to reach out to hopefully resolve any discrepancies. And so just as a general, this chapter is, summarizing the information from the water provider survey. There's not much analysis in it. But yes. Do y'all have any comments or things you would like to see?
Tricia?
This is Tricia Bernhardt, and I don't want to repeat the questions or the responses that I've already provided, but I did think that this chapter didn't work without some introduction. There's no, the average reader that's going through here doesn't understand what you're talking about by acre foot, what is surface water, what is renewable water, what is groundwater. It needs a basic water discussion before or at the beginning of this chapter so that the reader could follow what you're saying.
Absolutely, and I agree.
I wonder if Water Education Colorado has a lot of really good information like that. I'm wondering if we could accomplish that with maybe a reference to that, or another document that has that type of background in it.
Yeah, I mean, you could certainly add it as an appendix, but still, for the average reader just going through it and looking at it, something up front that helps them understand what you're saying as you go into this chapter, I think would be really helpful.
Yeah, kind of something I noted on, maybe it's a similar line, is I don't know that we effectively define wholesale water. And wholesale water, certainly the WISE water coming through these systems is wholesale water. In the Parker water data, we ended up with being shown as a demand, which is actually the 3,800 acre feet of WISE water that wheels through that system. And I think we've gotten corrected data off to you. But wholesale water needs to be reported as a source of supply at the recipient, the last person that gets that water. And I think there's some inconsistency on how they reported that data, or how the water providers might have reported that data to you, or how you saw that data. So that's the one thing. The other thing was reuse. I mean, there's a reuse discussion all the way at the end of the report, but there's nothing in the front. I'm not sure if it's clear how many people are doing either non-potable or potable reuse, but that's something that we'd really want to capture right in the front. And then finally, there's I don't know if this got back to you or not, but there's no groundwater basin. I'm looking for the right term. The designated groundwater basin. There's none in Douglas County. So any place that's on the data sheets and on the summaries needs to just really go away. So those are three things I saw.
So James Eklund again. No pressure, Claire, but when I saw this map that has the water providers on it, this is why we exist as a commission. This is the whole point of the plan, of why we meet, because that 51 different, I guess Aurora Water's on there twice, but
Meridian's on there 6 times.
okay. Well, there's a lot, but nonetheless, there are many, more than 24 of these color-coded patchwork quilt of water providers in the county. And I think this is a spot where, I think Commissioner Bernhardt's comment, it needs to say, what we're doing about that, if anything. If our point is just to inventory the water providers and tell a little bit about them, that's one purpose. But if we're trying to integrate from a county-wide perspective, how they work together, or if they don't, how this plan will help them do so, that this is a spot where it needs to be pretty clear about what we're doing with this map, this patchwork quilt, if we're not just here to describe it.
Evan, Ela, I have a couple comments following up on that on the map. I think it might be useful to expand the color palette a little bit. It's pretty much the same, and if we could get in some oranges and yellows and other things, maybe by size of provider or some of the things like that, that would help people see where things are. Because I think this will be a useful resource in the future to the commissioners, to anyone in the county, because it's interesting to know where these boundaries are and how integrated it is in some areas and how it's quite wide open in others. Anyway, that's one comment. The second is, one thing that I understand is these tables, for the most part, you're trying to standardize and capture the information that you got from the survey. But one factor that I think needs to be refined and worked on a little bit, you have a few places where you have your SFE shown, and sometimes it's a planning number, like under Highlands Ranch, they just use one SFE across the board, and that's how they do all their numbers. And then others, they may have a planning SFE, but then there's also a resulting SFE under some of these categories. And I think in the analytical part, you should work at trying to refine this information, see if you can get a resulting SFE from at least the major providers, and maybe everyone, and make a table of that, and maybe compare that to the planning SFE, and just so we get a range across the county of what these things, how they vary.
So Evan, are you talking about the acre feet per SFE number?
Per year, per residence, for example, but
Yeah.
then also for commercial and then for
Yeah.
multifamily, just for comparative purposes. But when you get to chapter 6, you go and develop a factor and then apply that for projecting into the future. And there's no real tie of the 0.19 that you use per capita back to what we have seen in these various providers. Well, it doesn't necessarily have to be an average, but I just think it would be useful to be able to see the range and to be able to compare some of that.
So they do have very different SFEs depending on, you know, their service areas and all. But, so what you're saying is, let's put that on a common basis, or?
Well, I guess, I mean, some way to analyze that, because, I mean, for every provider, you do have a single-family residential line. And then you have a multifamily, and then you have a commercial, and then some others. It would be neat if we could at least have a table of all the residential SFEs that are either, one column would be planning number that the utility uses, and then the other would be maybe a resulting, here's how much water they use in a year or have for the last 5 years. And they've served X number of population, which results in an SFE of whatever it is, 0.19 or 0.26 or whatever it is. And then you could see a range across the county, because that could possibly inform some of the policy direction of the county in the future. I don't know.
I had some comments following up on Commissioner Eklund's comments that I agree with. And that is some of the qualitative information contained in the report. For example, I draw your attention to 4-9, first paragraph, last 3 lines, where here we have Pinery saying their wells are showing a decrease of 3 to 7 feet. And I know factually, in talking with some of the smaller providers in our area, I know of 2 of them saying maybe they have 10 years of water left. So my sense of it is that that we need to be contacting these to get more qualitative report, and I call your attention to the report we had from Highlands Ranch Water, and I forget the numbers, but the number of their wells they can't even use. And I think that needs to be in here. I think some of that qualitative gives a basis for some of the decisions we'll be making later on. Also, I know, and of course we're all familiar with our own background, but at Dominion, you show that our before and after reuse the same. Well, it's not at all. Our reuse plan will be substantially higher. So I question, since it affects me, and I know that number, I question, because I see across almost all of them are the same reuse, before and after reuse, and yet reuse is a critical part of what we're saying as part of this report. I think there needs to be, we need to delve into some qualitative and contact these districts and also make sure that reuse plan number is correct.
Sean Tonner, piggyback a little bit on what Harold's saying, and I'll just call out, and if I'm reading this correctly, Meridian, we're going after their 2020. We're using their 2020 data, I think it was.
Right.
Because they just handed that over, they didn't want to respond to the survey, or?
They're working on an update to that and didn't want to release that just yet.
Okay. So, and not to single out Meridian, but I'll single out Meridian because they do have 4,000 to 5,000 acre feet of groundwater that they're projecting to be pumping. Now that we've kind of got it narrowed down, I think we got some great data from a lot of the providers, and we're starting to narrow down the ones that maybe aren't being quite as responsive or getting the data. Maybe between staff and the team, put a little more pressure on them to get that data in, because it's great that we have data from most of the large providers. Meridian being a medium-sized provider, I would have really hoped. Some of the 2 or 3 small ones that, you know, they're talking 50 or 150 acre feet, you know, we can worry about that at a later day, but I'd like to us put a conscientious effort towards getting as much of that data in as possible, because we're really going to have one shot to get this report out with as much data in as possible.
So,
This is Jim Morris.
Jim,
Yes, thank you. So from a formatting issue, there's 2 table 4.1s. And the first table 4.1 is a list of all the providers in the county. And I get that it's formatted similar to all the other tables where the first line is dark blue, and it's in all the other tables, that dark blue line is like a column header for the tables. In this first one, it doesn't make sense because it looks like the first two providers listed on there are some significant type of provider. It seems
Yes, sir.
unnatural, that dark blue line there that is not in all the other tables as far as the actual data.
Yes, sir, good comment.
Go ahead.
Oh, good comment, thank you.
The second comment I have is in the description of Perry Park Water Sanitation District, which is paragraph 4.4.12. And again, my knowledge here, like Harold's comment about Dominion, because Perry Park is where I am and I serve on that board. So the paragraph there is a little misleading in that the district where it talks about meets demand through treatment from alluvial wells. It meets some of our need through alluvials, but the accurate part is in 2010, the district switched from Glen Grove Water Treatment Plant, which is the alluvial well plant, to Sageport Water Treatment Plant, which is the Edward Basin groundwater plant. So we still use Glen Grove from time to time, usually during the summer during high needs. So like this time, for example, Glen Grove is sitting there idling. But we have a limited amount of that alluvial water we can use because of that treatment plant, but it still is in use. And Sageport, then, as it states here, is the majority provider for the district, and the water is conveyed to the west side via east-west pipeline. So that's all accurate. I think it needs to be tweaked a little bit about the alluvial wells, and Glen Grove is still in use. And that's our primary source of use of our senior water rights that we have over there. So, and again, I'm willing to help rework that paragraph, or you get in touch with the sanitation district. I'm sure they can help as well, but I'll make myself available to help if needed.
Okay, thank you. If you have specifics on that you'd like to provide to us, that'd be great. If you have a paragraph you want to shoot to us.
I sure will. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, sir.
A couple additional thoughts. One is somewhere in here, we need to reflect the fact that those who participated in WISE agreed not to bring any water over from the western slope. That was a requirement. And that the reuse water that is being used from WISE is part of an exception from the Blue River decrees. Sometime that's going to be important to us. I think the other is, with all due respect to my fellow commissioner, some of these smaller districts need special attention because they may be the least capable of dealing with some of the water issues that are coming. And so I do hope we take a look at some of these smaller providers. And I think also one of the things that is in here is some of these smaller providers are going to may need a contingency plan.
What was that, sir?
They need a contingency plan. But I do think we need to go back, as I mentioned earlier, and take a look at qualitative of what's going on with some of these. That report from Highlands Ranch Water was quite impactful about the number of wells they can't even use. And I think that needs to be included. Thank you.
Yeah, so, Will, I mean, this data is essentially what you got back from the water providers, right?
Correct.
So, this other stuff that we know, or like the Highlands Ranch presentation and stuff, you don't have particularly good access to that unless you just happen to have access to it, happen to be at the meeting that day, I suppose. So are you, do you have intentions to maybe contact most of these water providers and I'll say interview them, maybe for 30 minutes or 45 minutes or so to, first of all, make sure the data is all lined up, everybody's calling everything, saying, I mean, I can't remember which water provider it was, but they said that their Wise Water, they actually reported that as surface water because Wise Water, surface water, when really it's wholesale water, right? So, I mean, just kind of, there's just little details to kind of iron out there. So, I mean, is that in your plans or?
It is not in our scope to do that right now. And you're right, I mean, all of this review of the survey, we could spend a couple hours with each of the water providers and really hash it out and really understand the specifics there, but, you know, there's time to set that up and do that and document it. It's a significant effort and not in our plan right now, so,
Okay.
but there are some gaps there and that we need to reconcile.
So I guess a logical question when dealing with consultants is what would it cost to do that? Right?
Right.
If we think it's important, we can make an adult decision when we understand the cost.
Yeah, the other thing I was thinking is maybe another kind of an addendum to the survey that goes out to them all and says, you know, here's some clarifications on what we're looking for or some additional information. I noticed, you know, we had in the scope that we wanted to see, you know, all the interconnections between the providers. And some of the providers did write and say, well, yeah, we've got 6 interconnections with other people, but no real detail. And I think a lot of those are really kind of small interconnections, sometimes just little emergency connections or water quality connections, you know, where you get some fresh water in the line and stuff. So I think we'd still want to see that. So, I mean, that would maybe be something in this addendum to say, hey, we need more. Tell me you got 6 interconnections. Could you like maybe tell me with who, right? Who they might be, that kind of a thing. So, I don't know. Do we collectively think we want to see more information in this section? More data, more detail, more qualitative kind of stuff?
Yeah,
James.
James Eklund. So I think kind of tying into what you're saying, if I'm a water provider, I'm not clear on why you're asking me for this data. What are you going to do with it? What is in it for me if you do this? We're providing a coordinating mechanism, as I see it, and you guys can all correct me if I'm wrong if you see it differently, but it's a coordinating mechanism so that every part of the county has the capability of talking to every other part of the county. And if there are reliability issues or water stress starts to show up in a certain way, if this coordinating effect that this plan will provide is mobilized in action and put into action, then there's something that can be done about that. So it's not every provider for themselves, and you just, well, if you don't have it, you're out, too bad for you. This would start to provide at least the basis for water providers working together. And they may have ability to physically move water, or they may not. But if they're at least knowing what each other's situation and data is, there's you know, they start from not a dead stop. And I think making sure that that's part of the cover letter or whatever it is that goes out to these folks is you have to try and prod them for a response to the survey is they need to know what's in it for them. And I think there's great value in it for them, but I don't think we've articulated that yet or given you the language to articulate that value.
Just following up on that and Don's comment, I think it would be good information to have interconnectivity among the different providers somehow. Detail on that.
We need the mic turned on.
Oh, I'm sorry. To turn me off. Evan Ela again. I'm just following up on Don and James's comments, but I think the interconnectivity should be included in some way, either with a map or with some kind of narrative description about it, so that you can see where the large providers are actually connected to some of these at-risk or smaller systems. And they may not rely on them every day, but at least we know there's a reserve backup or something there.
Yeah, that was in the RFP document. We were looking for that. The Y stuff's kind of, that's easy. Those are maps that you can find online, but it's this other stuff we just don't really know about.
And we do have, that was a question in the water provider survey, so we do have some of that data from the responding water providers. And we are planning on doing some type of map to show that, I believe, right?
Yeah, maybe just in general to show those water providers that are connected. We hadn't planned to like show exactly where they're connected and, you know, if there's higher pressure on one side versus the other or whatever, and you can have a lot of detail about that. But maybe on the map, just show those that are connected.
Yeah, or just mention, I guess. Because I know that our, you know, I'm on the Chatfield South Board, and we have a connection with Highlands Ranch, and we have one with Denver, of course, which is our main supply, but then we also connect to the state park, kind of as an emergency. So those are there, those connections are there, but they aren't used other than the Denver source.
Okay.
All right, you guys ready to move on to the next chapter then? Okay, got everything on chapter 4 that we need?
One more thing. So, Evan,
sir.
Ela, if we want to send you specific comments, how's the best way to do that?
Do you want to come to you?
Yeah, this is Lauren Pulver with staff. You can send all comments to me. As Will said, trying to get them back to Forest Green by I'll give them about a week. So is that the
February 2nd?
February 2nd? But send them to me and we'll get them to Forest Green.
Okay.
Okay, so chapter 5 will be projected demands, more to come on that. And then we come to chapter 6 regarding water supplies. And Mr. Jason Broom is online with us. Jason, you want to go ahead and intro this for us?
You bet. Thank you, Commissioners. Good to be here with you today. So Chapter 6 summarizes a lot of what we just talked about in Chapter 4. I'll just kind of step you through the sections here as it covers current and future water supplies. So Part 6.1 reviews the types of supplies, and this addresses some comments earlier about, hey, how about some background on stuff. So this currently resides in Chapter 6. We'll talk amongst our team and see if maybe that should move somewhere else. But in general, we'll reorganize this section per a comment that we've seen where it'd be nice to see it from what is the most common type of water supply, and then go down through towards the least common, which in this case would be the designated basin groundwater, of which there is none. So we'll reorganize this and also add some additional terms that pop up in here, things like reusable supplies, renewable water, and just kind of cover that so that the reader has a good understanding of what those terms are referring to. And then the next part is 6.2, which is a recap and a summary of the current water supplies. And again, you've got a table there that reproduces the information from Chapter 4. There are a few slight discrepancies here, so we'll get those corrected. And again, we'll also reorganize the columns here to get you with what has the most supply, what has the least supply. One of the things that we noticed as we created this summary is that we're not sure that we have a good handle from the suppliers' responses on reuse water. You can see only a couple of suppliers specifically describe their reuse water volumes. So that's one of the things we want to go back and get a better understanding is how much reuse water is really available that's not quite getting reported yet in this table, and how that fits into the supplies. The next section is 6.3, the future water supply. So again, there's a table here that summarizes the response as far as what each provider is projecting for future supply needs and what they're going to be pursuing. Again, we'll reorganize this a little bit. Well, there's no reorganizing here. There's just a little bit of cleanup here mainly, but one of the things that we've talked about is some mapping similar to the Arapahoe County report, where we've got maybe some zoom ins on different parts of the county and we include some pie charts that show total supply versus how much they're using out of demand, just to give you a good, quick indication of how much of their supply they're projecting to use in the future. And then finally, 6.4 is going to review some potential water supplies, and our focus here will be primarily on recommending a more balanced portfolio between groundwater versus renewable supplies. And we'll particularly touch on some of the projects that suppliers within the county are currently working on or currently a part of. So WISE would be one of those. The South Platte Valley Water Partnership project with Parker in there as well. And then the Box Elder Creek project that Castle Rock is looking at. As part of that, we'll talk about how much potential water these regional projects can bring in. And then again, review, touching on the reuse situation and confirming how much reuse may be available as part of that portfolio. So that's kind of my brief overview. Open it up to any questions and discussion.
A couple things struck me. I thought one of the districts didn't they go into that confined basin up north? I think they did. That bought some water up there. Don't know if they're using them. That's something we might check. But beyond that, this chart, pardon?
Lost Creek.
Lost Creek. Yeah.
Castle Rock.
Castle Rock went in there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I couldn't remember who. I didn't want to be wrong. Who did that? But that's a big water supply up there. But it's not mentioned here. It says that we're not using, and that's an important water source. We actually optioned some of that years ago. It's good stuff. But one of the biggest things as I look at this, and this pie chart on 6-4, my compliments to you. What it's saying, when you consider reuse, since a lot of that reuse is coming out of groundwater, is over half of all the water used in this county is groundwater. There's a philosophy question here. Is that wise, no pun intended, use of a resource? I guess I asked the right question then, didn't I? But I think that is a shocking number. And as I look
It's not
at how
surprising, though.
folks are getting water into the future, and I'm just spitballing it because I didn't take the time to compute it, that's going to increase. And so I really think there's a fundamental question that this Water Commission needs to ask. Is that wise policy, that half our water comes from a non-renewable source? And I think the consultant should frame that question. Commissioners can answer that, but I think it needs to be answered.
Sean Tonner, I think also because there are some great projects being proposed by some of the major providers, I think back to the Lost Creek discussion with the closed basin, designated basin, sorry. There's Black Squirrel Basin down in El Paso County, which has some acre feet there. Obviously, there's the Rio Grande Basin, which hasn't been tapped. I think adding in, not necessarily where providers are going yet, but where potential, even though we don't have studies on it or anything, potential sources of water may be. Kind of to Harold's point, if we're at 50% is a non-renewable source, then, and then also with the projects that are being proposed by the major providers, what's the expected yield of renewable water from those sources? And then I think that'll give us a delta. Are we actually making up against that 50%? Or are we treading water, no pun intended, because of our growth?
Yeah, Evan Ela to follow on that. I think if this pie chart, I think this gives a current situation. We'd also want to see one of those projected for 2050 with these other supplies built in to see how it compares.
Yeah, James.
James Eklund. So the ASR capability may show up in the next chapter 7 on the groundwater analysis, but it seems like given the comments, it'd be important to at least reference that here. That's obviously the aquifer storage and recovery capability that typically has not penciled because water's value has not been high enough for it to justify the expense, the capital expenditure. But as the price per acre foot has climbed, it may change that analysis. So that capability, I know many water providers, some in this county and outside the county, have piloted projects that have looked at that, or they're actively doing it. But talking about that with some level of detail would be good. You have to treat it to put it down. There are some things that I think people that live in this county that may have familiarity with other parts of the country, Arizona, with the Central Arizona Project, and several other places where they've been trying to do a banking of groundwater in their aquifer systems for decades. It'd be good for them to know that we have our eyes open and that is part of the analysis here.
And Highlands Ranch has been doing that for many, many years and very successful at it, so, yeah.
That may actually get into your reuse,
Yeah.
Yeah.
is really what that may be. I think I'm a little bit concerned. I know for the WISE participants, I think South Metro actually put the numbers together. And I'm curious as to how much in-depth discussion we had with the individual water providers on their current and future plans. And if we didn't do that, which I understand that, this is data gathering, then I think we need to have an understanding of what the cost would be to do that and actually dig a little bit deeper. Otherwise, you're not going to get a good, accurate look at what water provider is going to be in 2050 when you do that pie chart.
Yeah, so Harold, I think, I looked at the data that Parker Water submitted, and it was a spreadsheet. It was a giant Excel spreadsheet. It was really fun to try and read through, but it was, reported 2030, 2040, 2050. So all the data that we're seeing here, wasn't, I won't say they didn't actively mine it out of these water providers. It's whatever they put in the spreadsheet and sent us, right? So I think we're seeing, tell me if I'm wrong, but I think we're seeing some difference on how people may have responded, how much detail they put in. I was having a hard time with all the detail we put in, trying to ferret out what that meant. So it's only as good as what they gave us, right? And unless we go back and poke at them and question them and say it's inconsistent, then we have to live with what they said.
And even the surveys took several months to get those back. So it's, they're in the business of providing water, and so it's a different task for them for sure.
But having said that, once we see the data, maybe that's an action that we take up, right, as a commission, to say we need to go look at this harder and initiate. We can kind of initiate more studies, if you will, or push the study in different directions as we see the results. At least that's the way I would see it. So.
Don, real quickly, Tricia Bernhardt, wasn't that one of the plans, is to have the water providers come in for a workshop? If they all came in together, could they maybe be encouraged to share information? Is that just
I don't think
Pollyannish?
I don't think we've talked about that, right? We've talked about bringing them in individually with individual presentations. I guess we've had 3, right? Just really. We had South Metro, and then we had Castle Rock.
Parker,
That's just.
and the wastewater.
And Dominion.
And Dominion, sorry.
And Dominion, yeah, we did.
And the intent is that one of the focus groups would be water providers, and so that might be a
Right.
good forum to talk about that further.
That's what I'm
Well,
referring to.
So that makes that focus group forum, what I'm hearing today is, that makes that one really important to us. That's not just show up, sit around the table and chit chat, that we want to really be prepared maybe with some questions more detail on the data, that'd be the time to do it, right? Yeah, Harold?
I don't think it's a focus group. I think we need additional data, and I think you get that by going back to them, because these water districts, they've got nothing to hide. Every one water district of any size has got plans 10, 20, 30, 40 years out. They have to. So I think it's a question. I'm not so sure well, you admit it, you didn't really ask them. You just took the data that came in. And so I think going back and clarifying that data, particularly when you're building the longer-term plan, would be very valuable. They'll tell you.
This is Jim Morris. The table 6.2 on the summary of future water supplies, and I think it's in one of the other sections where it talks about that currently, I think it's 160,000 acre feet has already been appropriated in the Denver Basin. I think it's related to the Denver Basin. It's in one of the other sections, but it would seem that that data regarding the current supply, where it's showing, about 120,000 acre feet, that there is a pretty significant additional appropriation that's been made by the state already to these existing providers in various forms, I would suspect, in the Denver Basin. But that might be relevant here to somehow present that it's already been appropriated. Second item is, again, on the future water supply. So our water district obviously has mitigation plan dealing, with returning water to the flows in the stream. I know this issue has come up in our district. When we did our plan and went to water court, we did not consider the return flows from properties that are on septic tanks where that water is leaching back into the ground. It's my limited understanding of the state rules that water that's leaching back into the ground from septic tanks can be somewhat accounted for as far as return flows. And so that, again, may be something we work towards to ensuring that everybody that can account for that source of return flow accounts for it, going into the future.
I have a little bit in the weeds comment on table 6.1. And in the column that says surface water, I think in the case of Southgate and Meridian and Roxborough, that actually is, that's wholesale water that they're getting. Like Roxborough's getting all their water wholesale from Aurora, but they went ahead and classified it as surface water. So I think it's more properly classified as wholesale water because we're trying to get at water providers within the district finding surface water sources, renewable water sources, and I just think that tends to cloud the data just a little bit. So
You said for Roxborough, what are the other ones you mentioned?
Southgate's all Denver water, right? Meridian and Roxborough. I mean, they're buying surface water wholesale, so I guess you could say it's kind of both. But I think for our analysis, we want to see that in a wholesale column, not a surface water column. Because when we're thinking surface water, we're thinking renewable, right? We're trying to think it's not groundwater, it's something else, so.
This is Clark Hamelman, we had a presentation from South Metro Water, and we don't have any reference in this plan that I've seen at all to them. That we talk about WISE a little bit, a couple sentences is all. Because, I mean, that's a fairly significant portion of the water plan in the county, and I think we need to beef that up. And it's just confusing here. There's one sentence says, WISE water is available to 9 county water providers and makes up a portion of the water supply for Parker and Stonegate. Well, others also get a portion of their water. I mean, it's a true statement, but it leaves a lot out.
Gotcha.
But I think we ought to say something about WISE and South Metro.
Yeah, James.
Because that's exactly the collaborative effort that earlier is pointed out as one of the purposes of this report is to encourage that kind of activity, and it's already taken place.
Yeah, I'll just,
Comment?
James Eklund, I'll tie on to what Commissioner Hamilton just said. The WISE, Lisa Darling's told me on multiple occasions that they're actively working on their future comprehensive plan, kind of at the same time we're doing this. So having connectivity to what South Metro is doing would make a ton of sense. She seems willing to share what they're up to. This seems like this chapter 6 is the place where your infrastructure, capital expenditure, outlay, forecasts. In the state water plan, we had the benefit of having the statewide water supply initiative, the SWASI exercise. We're kind of going to have to put all of that supply-demand gap, how we plan on addressing it. A bunch of that's going to have to live in this chapter. So there's reference to needing to map the providers with pie charts showing demand versus supply. I can see that map in the water plan, and having that for this county would be, I think, super helpful. So I'm glad you referenced that at the bottom of 6-5. The pie chart or the bar chart showing reusable versus non-reusable. We need to talk about storage capacity and capability, both surface storage and groundwater alluvial storage or non-tributary storage. Seems like, yeah, this one's going to be a place where a lot of stuff lives, and making sure we get it all in there is going to be pretty critical to the chapters that follow.
Clark Hamilman, I'm going to add again on top of that, the pie chart, if it could somehow, under the wholesale, and I think that's where it goes, somehow capture the idea of water that is coming from within the county and water that's coming from someplace else. Some of that, I guess most of that wholesale water is coming from outside the county. And especially if we could get to the point of having the future pie chart, you would see that piece of the pie grow substantially, I would think. So if it could somehow split the wholesale between inside and outside the county, that would be, I think, really interesting.
I can't think of any inside county right off the bat, but
Yeah,
Yeah.
there must be some, but there's some sales from one to another within the county.
Yeah, I recall seeing somebody, it was like 100, it was like 100 and some acre feet or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah, I guess I don't know.
it was inside.
that's one zone.
Yeah, it's just that concept of
Yeah.
bringing.
So Harold, you got a comment?
Yes, two, I really agree with what Clark was saying on the idea of including WISE, because it also manages the Chatfield Basin water supply down there. So I think that needs to be brought in, so
Yeah.
maybe it's in the infrastructure. And then the second, please check one thing, this data from Roxborough shows no growth. I know that they have a number of taps that they include that they have not yet allocated and intend to do that, at least that's what I'm told. So I would just wonder if that's accurate. Did we check with Roxborough? Did we get a report back from them?
We haven't reached back out to them, but they
I
did
just-
provide the survey response.
This is Sean Tonner. Harold, I think they have 6 taps left.
Last I heard, they had more than that.
Okay.
But I don't know. I'm just doing a accuracy check, because I know they have some to sell, so this number should have changed. That's all I'm doing. Thank you.
Would you like to move to groundwater?
6 steps, but they have committed, they've got about 100 out there that they haven't connected, so that should change.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, good information. Thanks for the feedback on chapter 6. And so we'll turn to chapter 7. And this is where the really fun part is, where we talk about groundwater, so. Okay, Bill?
Yeah, this groundwater analysis has been provided to the commissioners a few times over the last couple of months, and this has been obviously included in the water master plan. Our intent on this analysis was to really look at those areas outside water providers on available groundwater analysis. We didn't get involved in the water providers' Denver Basin supplies, as they typically have that under decree or deemed consent. So we really want to take a look at, when new development or other development is thought of in the county, in the unincorporated, what policies or what groundwater may or may not be available. Again, we focused on Denver Basin. There is obviously fractured granite water that's in the western part of the county. There is some alluvial water, that's all subject to augmentation. And so we really focused on that Denver Basin and tried to give a analysis based upon utilizing, a larger data set, more accurate data set being geophysical logging and other logs that have been available throughout the county to give a better idea of what water may or may not be in that Denver Basin, from the Dawson all the way down to the Fox Hills. And our analysis, based upon looking at those records, indicated that the Dawson, is pretty close to what the state has estimated as the legal water supply, and that's not unsurprising, as that's been the most heavily developed aquifer in the county. And so we've seen a lot of geophysical logs in the Dawson that don't go down into the deeper aquifers because it's just geophysical log where they're at. And if they're going to go to the Dawson, for example, a geophysical log that aquifer. Same thing with the Fox Hills, but it's also on the opposite end of the spectrum. There hasn't been a lot of development in the Fox Hills. So basically our data that we've evaluated is fairly similar to what the state has evaluated when they did their analysis. But there's been quite a bit of development in the county since 1985 in the Denver, Arapahoe, and Lower Dawson. So that's where we've gotten more robust data than what the state utilized in '85 for their legal analysis. They have updated, which they can do, association with each decree, what site-specific conditions may or may not be out there. We have looked at that with various projects we've worked on and worked with the state on Petra analysis and others analysis we've done to indicate, whether there may be more water underlying a piece of land or less water based upon the data that we've been able to provide and evaluate. So that's kind of how we looked at the groundwater analysis. We also then looked at water level data. That is a complicated matter, specifically in the Denver Basin. The Denver Basin just doesn't recharge, not say recharge, but doesn't, if you're pumping it, the water levels don't recover as nearly as fast as what you'd see in an alluvial well. So depending on when that well was pumping, when it was shut off, how long it was shut off, there's a lot of data to go through and think about how to figure out what is a reasonable water level that has been collected either by USGS or the state. So it's not just as simple of taking a graph and saying, oh, well, it's 20 feet below the surface. That doesn't work because that well might have just been pumping and then just shut off, and that water level's not indicative of what the aquifer is. So we did a lot of work on that one. And then water quality, there really is not a lot of data out there on water quality besides what the water providers have. And that's, public available information that they send out to the state. But we looked at that as best we could on data that we see that's out there. And I know there was a couple comments on what reports we looked at in that, so we are cleaning that up as well. But I'll obviously open it up to questions and thoughts and what we can do on the groundwater supply.
Well, I'll start off. I was very concerned. I look at your 7.2 unincorporated areas. There's 484,000 acre feet unappropriated. 68%, that's paper water. We don't really know what's there. And I think, and I carry that on to 7.8, where the groundwater is volumetric by taking the parcel area multiplied by the net thickness. Volume is then multiplied by a specific yield, determined by state. Well, I think we're giving a false sense of how much water is there, because this doesn't say how much the tightness of the sands and everything else you can actually get out. So I really think, some of us been asking all along, what is the proven reserves that you can get out economically, and there's no way of computing that. Well, I think we need to back off. If that's true, then I think we need to put some very serious caveats in here about theoretically, we're still dealing with paper water. You don't know until you drill it, which is what you're saying in here. And also in another part of this section, you say that there should be a broader, which I really agree with, study to try and get into what is economically and realistically recoverable. But I think to say to the unincorporated area, there's 484,000 acre feet there is misleading. It also depends on where you are in the county, and you back kind of into that. But I think we need to be out front, because what I don't want to do is people looking at this and saying they have all this water. Because it depends on where you are, and we really don't know what we can get out of that. So I really think there needs to be some very serious definitions with that, and what really we can get. And I'd be the first one to say, if there's a broader study that needs to get into what really is out there, I mean, real proven reserves like, the oil patch deals with, then I think let's recommend that be a follow-on study. But in the meantime, until we know what's really, I'm very cautious of these kinds of numbers.
Okay, just real quick clarification. Harold, you mentioned, I think you said 7.8 or 7.4. Were you talking page number, table number? I just want to get on the
Oh,
same.
I'm sorry, this is page. I'm sorry, page. I'm looking at page 7.2, which is
Okay, I'm with you.
unincorporated areas, a gross of 484,000. And then
Right.
I was comparing that to 7.8, where we calculate what's there. But that may or may not be relevant to what's really recoverable. It depends on where you are, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I understand your point. I just want to make sure I was on the same,
Yeah.
literally, same page. Yeah, James.
Thanks, James Eklund. Chapter 7, on my read, is explicitly about physical groundwater volumes, not the legal abstractions. So if anything, it's a corrective to paper-only accounting of the type that my profession loves to do. The Petra model is about physical reality. It's not about paper water, Harold. So I don't quite agree with that characterization of it. I have not a scintilla of the type of understanding of the science around this that Mr. Franzak does, but my understanding of what little I do understand is that the Petra model is really the state of the art and is focused on the physical availability and the reality about what you can actually rely on being in the aquifer. But correct me if I'm wrong on anything that I just said.
I mean, that is correct. That's the best data we do have. I mean, like in the oil patch, billions of dollars are spent on seismic. I mean, obviously, we'd love to have the entire county, have a seismic review so we can take a look at things. Best data we do have is the geophysical logs, which is the actual logs of what the aquifer is. And we take a look at that to see, based upon those logs, how much water is actually going to be released, for the lack of a better word, from those sands. The state has also done that in 1985 when they looked at this. They actually looked at, did some testing on various wells across the Denver Basin to take a look at specific yield. That's the amount of water that's not held up by the rock itself. So there also has been some analysis in the past by the state in Senate Bill 73, and I can't remember the date on that one. It's been too many years, but they did look at the specific yields and whether that needed to be readdressed. And it was something that the state said it'd be very difficult, and that's why they basically put in site-specific conditions. And as you're right, Harold, this is the best data we have to see what may or may not be in those aquifers to be able to physically pull it out. There are a lot of factors that go into play with how much water that can come out, where the water levels are. You know, for an example, if a well is, has water levels halfway up the screen, you know, half the screen is, you know, not having any water saturated thicknesses, it pretty much becomes uneconomical to pump. So there's a lot of different factors going on, how the well was constructed, a lot of different things that go into play, but this gives us the best idea of what is physically there, you know, underlying the ground. How it comes out, I mean, it's just, you know, geology is tough. I mean, as we know, and even in the oil patch, it's very difficult. I mean, I've been working in that area for a while as well, and, you know, tens of millions of dollars go into a horizontal well, and they're thinking they're gonna get, you know, 300 barrels a day, and they get 5. You know, it's complicated, and I agree with you, though. I don't know exactly how we need to. It's very difficult from an engineering perspective to say, okay, well, this is the amount of water that we're showing from science, but you're only going to get 50% of that water. I don't have any to support that, and that's what I'm trying to figure out how. And I agree with your analysis. I don't want to give someone an overshot of, hey, we got 500,000 acre feet of water sitting underneath the ground. We can just go, you know, hog wild. That's one of those challenges that I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it.
And I really think, you know, you use the best technology you have. I'm not debating that. In fact, James just made my point for me, and that is that it's only valid in the areas you drilled, where you have wells, which is a limited area. And yet, a comment across the whole county in the unincorporated area that there's 484,000. We're making the same point. How do we describe that we really don't know, except in very limited areas, what we think is there? And that could change depending on the well, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's the concern I have, is I don't want people to say, well, they've got 484,000 acre feet of water. Maybe somewhere we do, but it sure isn't out in western part.
No,
or some
definitely not.
other areas like that. And that is my point. It's the best technology we have, and that's it. I do think eventually we do need to do broader studies to understand particularly the size of the county, because as we look where those wells were drilled, it's a pretty narrow area in there. And so anyway, that's my point.
I want to clarify something real quick here too, that, you know, this is 484,000 acre feet per year,
Yeah.
right? That the availability is, and these numbers are in acre feet per year. So that implies an enormous amount of water, right?
When we only
Really
need
does.
100.
Yeah, we only need, yeah, I think it's less than 100 right now, but yeah.
But-
Let's do Tricia and then you. Okay, her hand was up first.
Yeah, Tricia Bernhardt, I think it just needs to be explained better. The way it's presented right now is a little dangerous, in my opinion. All those things that you just discussed, you know, the variability in what you can actually withdraw, the locations of where you can withdraw things, all those things need to be discussed here so that the reader can formulate a little different analysis and a little different conclusion than what is in here right now. Right now, it looks like we have so much water, we ought to just build the whole county out. And that is a dangerous thing to be putting in this document. So we need to temper this and have a little better discussion about actual use of groundwater, the finite, you know, the way groundwater is finite. You just said it in the Denver Basin. You know, it doesn't recharge. Recharges a little bit, but not very much. These things need to be explained better. It's my opinion. Thank you.
Fair enough. Yeah, Clark.
Clark Hamelman, I agree totally. I mean, 2 years ago, when we first started this, we had a lot of discussion about it. Are the aquifer levels going up or down? And this just gives a number of what's there. It doesn't say what it was 10 years ago. It doesn't say what it's going to be 10 years or 20 years in the future at 2050, where this plan is targeted. And it doesn't at all answer the question about what's my well, what's happening to my well. And we have said all along for 2 years here that we were comfortable that the major water providers were doing a good job and had plans in place. The hole in this whole thing for the county was the 9,500 individual residential domestic wells out there that people don't know what's going on. And I don't see that this tells them anything. If I want to go buy a house in Keene Ranch that has a private well, reading this report isn't going to tell me what my well situation is going to be in 2050 when I go to sell that house. It doesn't get us there. And maybe it can't, but it doesn't get us there.
Sean Tonner, I think where we could give the reader and also the commissioners and future water commissions a job is, we got ours right now. To your point of, and you said it in the preamble, which is, more data needs to be derived, more analysis, whether it's seismic, and I realize we're starting big numbers, but if we, say a study of seismic in these areas of the county so that we start to get more data about what we're standing on top of. And we're getting better with Petra than we were with the state, but then the next leap we need to take as a county, given that 50% of our water, in most cases, is come from below our feet, really understanding what's there and investing to understand what's there. So I think maybe if we, at the beginning, we just kind of lay out and say, look, this is the latest and greatest, but really to get a good deep dive of what we actually have, we need additional information.
Yeah, it's dark down there.
So I've heard.
Evan, Eli, just to throw in on this same topic, I guess. It seems like Mr. Franzak is exactly right. I mean, this number that's thrown out here is what's down there. The economically recoverable portion is less, but we don't seem to have any good data on that unless there's something you guys can dig out. But it probably wouldn't hurt to have a statement or two in here that says, well, there is this limiting factor, and that's the economic recovery amount. You may not have the answer to that, but at least it puts a little conditioning on it. But it's also true that all this, the fact that Petra predicts more water than Senate Bill 5 did is because of more site-specific data. I mean, there's the trend in the site-specific data is that the specific yields are greater and that the sands are thicker or whatever it is that creates more water available. So given the state of the science, the trend is that, that there is more water recoverable than current regulatory scheme. But you do need to moderate that with this language about what the economic recovery is.
And we know it's non-renewable water, so we're mining it over time.
Right.
And costs of production are going to continue to increase for that water. So there's no free lunch, right? It's, even if there is a lot of water there, the cost to access it is going to continue to be a factor. And so the message, the upshot, I think, is, so we need to use what we have very carefully, conserving, reuse, those types of things, and play up that part of the report.
Real quickly, Don, the other part of this message is the rural part of this county, mostly the southern part and the eastern part, we have no other water sources other than groundwater. You've heard me say that so many times. So if the groundwater is extracted to the point where rural Douglas County does not have any water for the well users, what is the county's obligation there? I mean, we don't have a water district that we can connect to.
So I
Well, but
think
some of that is in the analysis, right? I mean, the upper aquifers are being relied upon by the individual wells primarily. And so if you look at the macro scale, I mean, the real developable water is Arapahoe certainly, and maybe in the Denver by the big suppliers. They can put in $1.5 million well and they can extract at a high rate, and that makes a lot of sense, and there's a lot of resource there. And the other beauty about the non-tributary water is it's completely reusable. It's 100% reusable. So if you have a closed system, you can greatly increase the efficiency of your use of that withdrawal. So I just don't think you have to stay away from groundwater as being, don't touch it. It just needs to be described in the way that that has its benefits as well, and ways that it can actually enhance efficient water use.
I think we're selling the rural area short with this whole report. I feel very strongly that's really what this report is for the 9,500 wells out there. That people are self-providing their water. They don't show up in any of this data. And at a minimum, there ought to be a separate section in this report that goes to what is the status of the 9,500 or 10,000 individual wells in the county, and what is the county's obligation? What can the county do to help those people understand their situation better? And if all we have is a bunch of questions that aren't answered, at least we get the questions in there and start to work on answering them.
Let me make a comment real quick first. And maybe this is because we're so close to it, but if you look at like Table 2 and Appendix B, and it talks about water that's available for appropriation in the Dawson Aquifer, it's like there's hardly any, right, if I remember that chart. So, I mean, in the detail there, it highlights the difference between what is going on in the Dawson and probably the Denver and the Arapahoe. And the Arapahoe is, I would say, generally only accessible for water providers and big high production wells. And there's a lot of water there. It's big, it's deep, it's thick. That's good news, right? But I would agree that, the Upper Dawson and what's going, I mean, there's issues probably with contamination too, the Upper Dawson from alluvials getting contaminated, from pesticides, that kind of stuff. I mean, there's a lot more going on there that I just don't think we've really captured very well yet. I would agree with that. James was first.
Thanks. So the appendix that you referenced, Appendix B, you're right, isn't going to be able to specifically detail the situation for each well, but is it possible, I guess is the question, is it possible to extrapolate when we're putting the map of the county together and forecasting the gap? Is it possible to lump the 10,000 wells into a risk profile that would add some sort of value to the well owner? And it's not saying they're going to run dry in the next year, or they're going to, be okay for a period of years, but it's giving them some risk data that they can hopefully make some decisions with in terms of, the viability of their situation. Is that something is that kind of extrapolation doable, make sense, not make sense?
I mean, some of the thoughts.
Yes.
Some of the thoughts that I had about that we do have some heat maps that are in our GIS model. That might be something that we can print out and reference. A bulk of this water that might be available in the Denver and the Arapahoe and the lower Dawson is in the south and in the eastern part of the county, but it's very deep. It's not going to be economical for a private landowner to probably drill a 1,500-foot well. The Dawson, the challenges that we've seen there is we're seeing some water level declines in certain areas. Overall, there's still water, what we call artesian water. There's still water in the wellbore. In other words, there's pressure that still is pushing water up above the top of the aquifer. The challenge we've seen is a lot of these water users or individual property owners have not completed their wells properly. And I have data on that. The question is that something we want to put out to the local individual property owners? Because there's nothing we can do.
I think you showed us that in the presentation.
I did. I did not put it in the report because it is very controversial. It's basically saying, hey, you didn't drill your well properly. And a lot of the conversations I've had, not only in Elbert County, but Arapahoe County and elsewhere, is like, well, what's the state going to do? They're going to come and re-drill my well? No. I'm sorry. That's on the individual property owners. What you buy. I mean, what we're trying to do with that geophysical or the GIS model is to be able to have people go out to their property, and I admit it's a little clunky right now. I have to work on that, but that GIS mapping. Go out to your property, you can take a look at that well, you can see how deep it is, you can see what the water levels are, and you can get an idea of where you're at and make some decisions for yourself. But that's a lot of the challenges I've seen is the wells are not completed properly.
You know, I look at this, I guess, from the perspective of the private provider and the buy and sell process. If I'm going to go look at a $2 million home over here in Keene Ranch that's on 10 acres and has a private well, do I want to buy that property or not? And if I'm going to do my due diligence, one of the things I'm going to do is go to the county's report on water and look at it and see what it says. And I guess what it's saying right now is, yeah, there's 484,000 acre feet of water there. Buy the house, don't worry about the water. And then after I'm there for a year, the well goes dry, and now I got to spend 200 grand digging a 1,500 foot well. I'm going to be irritated.
And that's one thing that I've thought about in the past. I mean, prior, and this is in the real estate records, is there used to not have to report where your water was coming from. I remember when I was at the state, early 90s, it was, I'd get a phone call, I'd get a dozen phone calls a day. My water's out. Like, okay. Tell the utility to turn my water back on. I'm like, well, you have a well. I do. I have what? I said, you have a well that's provided your property. So a lot of property owners didn't even know they had a well back then. Now in your real estate records, you have to disclose. Are you on public water? Are you on public sewer? Are you have a well or a septic? One thing that I've thought through, maybe this is something the state gets involved with, or maybe this is something the county can request as they do real estate transfers, because that is exactly the issue. I mean, I've been in the water business for a long time. I wouldn't buy a house unless I knew exactly what that well was doing. Age of it, I'd have it, I'd put it on a cellar, I want it video logged. You tell me what, I'd make them do it. A lot of property owners don't know that. But is there something that you can take it another step further in those real estate records? When you have to do your due diligence, your disclosure of your house, like, well, I got a problem with my roof, whatever the issue is. Here's my well permit. I got to provide that to the property owner. I don't know. Right now, it's not required. It just says I'm on a well, I'm on a septic. And it's up to the property owner to go and take a look at what that may or may not be. I don't know if this report would be able to give them that specific of amount of data besides getting to a GIS map where they can maybe look at that. And maybe there can be an explanation of that about what that GIS map might be able to point people to and give them a roadmap or a menu about what data is potentially out there to get to right where you're saying is, hey, I'm buying a house at XYZ. I've been disclosed by the realtor that it's on a frickin' well. I don't know anything about groundwater. I can go now to this report that says, oh, there's data that's out there. I can click on where that property is and click on where that well is. It can pull up the state engineer's information, which is the only information, a lot of what we have, and give someone an idea of what's going on.
I really think we need to have a separate section in this report that is for those 10,000 individual wells. Because if I live out, if I have one of those wells, I read this report, I've learned nothing. I've learned absolutely nothing that's beneficial to me if I have one of those wells. Now, if there's a separate section, and even if all it says is, we don't know whether your well is going to work next week or not, depends upon how well it was put in, how deep it is, a whole bunch of factors. And here are some of those factors. We can't answer the question about your individual well with a county-wide report, but here's the ways you can answer that question for yourself. That would be tremendously helpful for some people. Maybe that's already out there in some documents. Maybe the states put that together, but I don't know. It ought to be there.
I think I really like your comment on page 7-9, ultimate paragraph. It says it all. I think what it needs to do is permeate throughout the report so that we read this and people say there's 480,000 acre feet per year available. This actually, I think, says it all. It's a best guess. We think it's there, but it depends on where you are and how you drill your well and where it is and how long it lasts, et cetera. And one of the things I want to be very careful of, we've had several reports, I keep going back to Highlands Ranch, that their wells are failing. And so I think making sure everybody understands that this is an estimate, we really don't know. The other thing I really hope we bring in from what I've seen in terms of quality, if you could please validate Laramie Fox Hill, some of the water coming out of there, you can't, it's full of sulfur, you can't do a thing with it. I think that needs to be brought out. It's trick or treat what you're going to hit down there, depending on where you are. And to rely on that as a water supply solely, I think is a fool's errand. And so I hope that you'll validate that, make sure people understand it, because I could see someone being sold, well, there's all this water under here, Laramie Fox Hills. Well, there is, but you can't use it. I think the other thing that I really, the county with this report, editorializing for a minute, is at a bit of a crossroads. We have this incredibly valuable asset. Our best guess at 480,000 is a huge amount of water. We think how much we can get out of it. We really don't know. Depends on where you are, et cetera, et cetera. Is that going to be a primary supply as it is now, which is 50% of the water, or is the county, should the county be thinking of goals? Eventually, we want to replace that with renewable, and what does that mean? So that really becomes what I believe, it's an incredible backup source that we don't have to worry about drought. But it also, you mine it out and it's gone. So I hope somehow in here, and I don't have a magic wand how you frame that issue, but that issue gets framed.
Is that a matter of economics that is going to determine that balance, right, over time? And so,
It's economics and reality. Economics as power becomes more expensive, et cetera, But also, that's an incredible asset that you cannot be affected by a drought. We're one of the few places in this part of the country you have that. So the question is, we're going to mine it out or not? That's a question. I don't know what the answer is. Well, I know what I would say the answer is, but that costs money.
a little while ago, you referenced, was it page 7-9, where you, what was the?
7.9, the last paragraph, where it says physically available groundwater refers to Petra. This term only refers to calculation available. This estimate does not claim or guarantee the amounts calculated are fully available to a well owner. Well said. I think it needs to be emphasized. In SEC days, that would be in letters about that big.
They say that multiple times. That, yeah, this is an analysis and there's no way to really know without drilling a well. But that's kind of a given.
There seems to be another unwritten assumption in this report that the state of water quality that exists today is the state of water quality requirements in 2050. So if all of the treatment requirements, if none of the treatment requirements change in the next 25 years, then all of this, that's the assumption that's in here. But if treatment requirements change significantly between now and then, that may put a totally different look on this. From a couple perspective, what water's available, how much it costs, I guess, but also what's the optimal way to treat water with 27 or 30 individual providers in the county, or with 3 or 4 large treatment facilities in the county. So I think we need to, I think that if we're assuming no change in treatment, I think we at least need to say that. And that if there is a significant change in the required treatment processing that forces you to go to cost-effective and large, efficient operations, that could change a lot of the assumptions.
Just one quick point of order before you go, Sean. We just stumbled into Commissioner Conway's wheelhouse right here. I mean, Metro is the water treatment provider, bar none, in Colorado. And I know they're, analysis and planning incorporates everything for the water quality side, as we've been talking about for the water quantity side here for the last, many years. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, where we should head when talking about water quality and that challenge.
Yeah, Mickey Conway. Well, I mean, Clark's right. I think it's not reasonable to assume that we won't have stricter quality quality standards. We will, for sure. How that affects quantity, that's a good point as in terms of availability. But yeah, I think noting that the trend has been increasingly strict and increasingly more expensive to treat water, and that affects the ability to deliver it too. So, for sure.
This is Evan Ela again. The water quality of the Arapahoe aquifer is clean now, and is much less likely to degrade with respect to what new treatment standards come out than surface water. All of the surface water, wherever it is in the state, is way more vulnerable to degradation than the water that's sitting in the Arapahoe aquifer. So it's another benefit of the deep groundwater.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Sean Tonner, and yeah, Clark, thank you for bringing that up with them, Mickey. Is there a way, I mean, looking at history over the last 25 years, since we're going to 2050, is there a best guess swag analysis of what we think the increased restrictions are going to be on water? Or is it just a wild ass guess? Can we use history as a guide at all?
Yeah, actually, you can look at current activity by CDPHE in terms of regulatory work they're doing on feasibility, because we're going to go to extremely low nutrient limits in the next 10 years, and then they're going to add constituents like temperature and, then you got your man-made contaminant issues, which all the surface water is going to be affected by. So I don't know that the historical guide in terms of trend on cost will be applicable to this, because we're going to see a really big ramp up, so it might be difficult to predict.
So in that, I think it would be beneficial in the report, I mean, knowing that we don't know what the future is completely, but maybe have an asterisk saying there are increased restrictions coming down the pike, which will then drive up availability and cost on whatever water source it is.
I think those are perfectly reasonable statements that are supportable, yeah.
I have something for the parking lot. One of the beauties of the 50% of the water we're getting, which is groundwater, is it is 100% renewable. Somebody mentioned that earlier, thank you. That only does us any good if we get it back. And so I believe a section in this report should be on reuse. We can talk about conservation, that's kind of common now, but the real issue is reuse and getting it all back. Jim just mentioned, you could file on those septic returns. And I don't know, Rory used to file on those lawn return flows back in the day. I don't know if that ever went anywhere or not.
Well, of course.
But we should really emphasize in the county reuse. And that can get into some policy issues that don't exist today. We talk about the water source, but where's it go? And I think I'd like for you to consider a section on that. How do we do it? And how important is it? What can the county do?
Okay, thank you for the feedback. That's, really appreciate it. A lot of good thoughts and good discussion today for sure, so appreciate that. I know we need to wrap up here in about 5 minutes, so maybe if
Hey,
we can.
you can't adjourn the meeting.
What's that?
You can't adjourn the meeting, I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to touch on the engagement.
Yes, I think that'd be great.
If we could pull that up.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, this is Evan Ela again. I had one other follow-up question. On the, I don't remember which table, it's back in Appendix B or A or B, where you break out the amount of groundwater that's been decreed, adjudicated, as distinct from unappropriated or unadjudicated. Does the adjudicated part also include the pre-213 circle amounts, or does it not?
It's different. It's actual decreed water. Pre-213 is not decreed water. It's just water that's,
I know that, but it's water that's already been,
it's already been, yeah, so we've taken the pre-213 out, but we've not taken out the decreed water. And the reason is because the decreed water can be bought and sold. You know, just because you have a decree or you have a determination of the amount of water along your land, doesn't mean it's actually been put to use. And so like a lot of these properties have Dawson through Fox Hills, you know, determined, and we have a number about what that might be. That water can then be, you know, bought and sold. So the pre-213 is tied to the well permit itself. So that's why we've carved that out.
okay, so this table 5 in appendix, whatever it is,
B.
you have a percent of each aquifer that's been decreed. So that's strictly just adjudicated. It does
Strictly
not
just
have the
adjudicated.
pre-213 allocations in it.
No.
Okay.
The
That was my question.
pre-213 is in, it's
Well,
been.
no,
it's-
you do break it out elsewhere,
Yeah,
but.
because it's
it
a
wasn't-
quantification I mean, basically, it's based upon based upon beneficial use.
Yeah.
Because prior to 1973, you got a well permit, you had to put it, you had to drill it, and then you had to put it to beneficial use. And then the way the state has married that policy or that water right to the Denver Basin, which was in 1973, and then further in 1985, was we got to calculate a cylinder of appropriation. We got to basically back calculate amount of land associated with that pre-213 well, so we can all be on the same page when we're looking at it. How it comes into play is if I have an overlying land ownership and I have a pre-213 well next to it, and that cylinder of appropriation impacts my overlying land, I reduce that acreage by that amount that pre-213 was computed.
Yeah, I think you actually explained that pretty good in the report. So you want to get to this
Yes, sir.
engagement,
So-
please?
These are preliminary dates targeting for the focus groups would be end of February, beginning of March. Those are the 3 different focus groups that we are planning for. And then public engagement, the April to July timeframe, targeting that for the social pinpoint and open house or public workshops and engagement opportunities. So just overall, that's where we're heading with this after we've worked through this with you all. And focus groups, will be looking for them to give us input on recommendations for policies. And then also, you know, as we talked about earlier, water providers' information on their water supplies, more so. Some of those things.
So when you say share work to date, does that mean we give the water providers the draft plan as we have it today? Or is this going to be some sort of a detailed presentation with a lot of data in it? How do you envision that?
We'll have to think more about that. I think maybe we give them the chapter about the water providers and have them comment on that, but
Chapter on
we're
groundwater
thinking
would
of something
probably be-
more targeted probably with their input and feedback.
So I thought we weren't going out to focus groups or public until we work through this, but that's not true.
We are hoping to do it concurrently, that there'd be, okay.
Why don't we take something out that we
It's going to change.
sort of feedback that what you've done is right?
Yeah, the thought, oh,
Just interject in the middle of it, and they don't have the background stuff. I don't know, do it. I thought we were going to work through this, we'll get
mhm.
feedback, one more turn through this, and then
We were looking to the focus groups for feedback on policies and then bring that back to the Water Commission for discussion and then inclusion in this next draft of the report.
Yeah, maybe everybody else can kind of weigh in here too, but I feel like focus groups in February also feels premature, and we haven't got to the other chapters. The other chapters are like land use planning, right, which staff has been, working on quite a bit. So, I mean, that's where this is all going to end, right? I mean, the land use policy is what this is, among other things, but that's really core to this whole deal. So I feel like focus groups in February feels early too. I mean, anybody else want to?
Would hope that we have an opportunity to look at the policy recommendations and the Chapter 10 implementation document before it goes out public.
And the focus groups, that's probably going to be a couple of meetings with them. So maybe there's an intro meeting to talk through where they were going with that, and then a second meeting where you actually get the recommendations. And so here we're thinking about where we get that started. That process might start beginning of March. But if you think that's pushing too much, then
I sense a discomfort with that, would be the term I would use. Yeah, James?
No, you're good. So we really need to, this has been a great conversation, and thanks for leading us through the draft and putting the draft together. But stepping back, I think my view of what we've talked about today, the commission needs to agree on whether this plan is meant to document adequacy or drive resilience. Is this supposed to be a plan that has a contingency facet to it that is actionable, or are we just describing, is it an atlas or is it a plan for action? And those are two very different documents. The SWASI, the Statewide Water Supply Initiative, was a water atlas. It did a great job of saying, here's where water is, here's where demand is headed, here's the gap, but it did not make policy recommendations, it didn't make contingency plan suggestions. And when you sit up in front of any group, in any capacity, it seems to me, having kind of been in that position, it would be a real disservice to you as the facilitator of that conversation to not be equipped with the basic answer from us about what the heck this thing does or doesn't do.
Mr. Chairman, I move that until we get feedback from what we discussed today and go through the other sections, that we hold off on focus groups and going public with the document. I really think that would be wise.
So Lauren, please.
This is Lauren Pulver with staff. I do want to make it clear that the document is public. It was provided to the Board of County Commissioners in an agenda item, so it's out there. I know some of our water providers are already reviewing it and providing feedback. And just to, I think, add to Will's comment, the thought on the timing of the focus groups was to get some initial feedback on the Chapter 10 recommendations that you could all kind of absorb from our experts, but certainly can be flexible as needed.
I think that's fine. I maintain my motion. I think until we get the feedback from today's section and these others, where we have some level of comfort before it goes out, I don't want to waste everybody's time. We have these water providers looking at something we've just rewritten or changed. We just wasted time. So I don't recognize it's legally public, but I think until we have one more turn in the barrel of what we discussed today and the next one, I think we should keep it here before we go out public. And I made that motion.
And I'll just say as the second to the motion that that's exactly what we did with the water plan. It was public. Every draft was public. Every draft solicited input. If people wanted to opine or give suggestions or edits, they were more than welcome to do that. But we didn't put like our official stamp on it as this is our product that we endorse and want feedback on until we had gone through the exercise that we're talking about. So I just second Harold's motion.
So it kind of feels like we have a motion on the floor and seconded. And the motion would be to request that our contractor refrain from doing focus group work until after our meeting after the Water Commission meeting in February. So let's vote. All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
Okay.
Aye.
No, I think that's fair. No time
agree.
limit. I mean, we'll know when it's right. Right. Yeah, James? Aye. I see no nays, so that motion carries. So we can work that through with Forest Green. Yeah, Tricia?
Yeah, quick question, Tricia Bernhardt. How will you choose the well users that would participate in this focus group? Are you going to advertise to well users? Do you have a hand-picked selection of people you know? How is that going to be done?
We have a preliminary list already, and I think that was drawn from the rural water users group. Any, remember that?
Yeah, we did that as well as take a look at what, we also took a look at who participated in the USGS water level studies. Got a list of those folks as well as the well permits and tried to look at data that would be representative of the entire county from north to south, east to west to kind of look at it. Didn't really focus in on the fractured granite, but mainly in the Denver Basin.
Right.
So we tried to at least look to folks that have been engaged, with at least some of the water level measurements, these type of things.
You good? One last quick question, because we are running out of time, and somebody's going to run in here in a minute and throw us out. No data on non-exempt wells that I've seen in here. Is that correct? I mean, do we know what non-exempt well users are using places like, golf courses, things like that? I mean, we don't solicit data. We didn't solicit data from them. Like, we. All right, we'll talk about that some more then. Okay. Okay, I think we're ready to adjourn. I would second, I think it was Will's comment. I thought that was a great conversation. I really did. We really covered a lot of ground, and I think this commission is just really comfortable with each other, and I think it's working well, so thank you for that. Yeah, Sean. Okay, let's adjourn.
Thank you.